Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to Diverse Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And remember, click that subscribe button, everybody. It's an amazing episode because Jesse Lonergan boards the mothership. You know him as the artist of Miss Truesdale and the Fall of Hyperborea. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Lonergan. Thank you so much for coming to the Diverse Stars podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's totally my pleasure, sir. So we start off with the question of inspiration. So what inspired your love of comics and who your earliest influences?
Um, I don't know. I think like at a very young age, it was probably more like comic strips. So Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes, were kind of my favorites. My favorite as a kid. Um, and I don't think I really read comic books until like high school. And I saw like an issue of Spawn that a friend of mine had. And I didn't like I felt like I had this idea of what comic books were in my head, which was sort of this like 1970s,
Mm.
Jack Kirby, John Deshima thing. Not that I fully understood that, but I was like, that's what a comic book is. And then I saw this thing, and I was like, I don't know what like comic books are. And I had my friend like I grew up in rural Vermont and like draw me a map to the comic book shop. And then I was sort of like, kind of got hooked into all the image titles. And then sort of moved off into like more indie stuff like Peter Bagg, and Hate and Dan Clowes and Eight Ball and that sort of stuff. And that's sort of where it began, I guess. And sort of it keeps I feel like comics keep having this quality of like evolving where there's always new stuff coming out and like new perspectives and like new sort of ways of looking at the medium, but then there's also all the stuff you don't know about in the
Mm.
past that like you're like, oh, I didn't know about this person. And all of a sudden and like uh all of a sudden you're like, oh, I need to go like hunt down all of this stuff. So like, when you're like 16 looking at Image Comics stuff, you don't know about Alex Toth. And then all of a sudden you discover who he is, and you like start hunting down his stuff. And so like, I don't know, it's like kind of constant discovery, constant feeling of getting started.
Oh,
Um,
I agree completely. I've been buying comic books for over 30 years, and I think it was only like 3 years ago, 2 years ago that I discovered Usagi Yojimbo, and I was like,
oh
"Holy
yeah.
shit, this is so good!" And I was like, "Where had this? It's been around since before I was buying comics. I was like, where has this been in my life?"
Yeah, it's amazing how you can also just like
Yeah,
miss something. Like it can be sort of ever present, or like maybe you know about it, but then you don't actually like look at it. Like
yeah.
Gru would be like another example of like I remember my cousin had some Gru comics, and when I looked at them, I was like, man, not my thing. And then like 4 years ago, I was like, these are amazing. What? Why was I so dumb in the past? Like, so yeah, there's
Yeah,
always
it, it,
always
it,
things.
that's why comics are so fantastic. Like back in the day, I was buying Spawn. Not when it came out, by around issue 2030, I got into Spawn, and around
Yeah.
issue 100, I was like, all right, I kind of felt like all right, I reached about as much of Spawn as I'm ever gonna get to, in the story, so I quit. And then I got back into it around issue 300 because it was the big push on it. And I've been buying it
Yeah, yeah.
again ever since. It's just comics are just weird how that works, like these weird ebbs and flows, these weird little
Mhm.
turnoffs you take and you ramp ons.
Yeah, yeah. Especially just like with anything that goes that long. I don't know if that's it feels like the industry's shifting away from that. So I don't know. I don't know how many more 300 issue runs there'll be. But like Savage Dragon would be another one where
Yeah.
I was on it at the beginning and I left and then like came back and left and it's like sort of like it just keeps going. And has its good points and bad points, I guess. Uh,
Well, that's why comic books are absolutely fantastic. Now, you have lived in so many cool places. You've lived in California, Saudi Arabia, Turkmenistan. Am I saying that right? Turkmenistan?
Turkmenistan, yeah.
Turkmenistan. So, how did experiencing these different varied and varied places and cultures impact you as an artist?
Um, I don't know specifically how it is. I mean, like Saudi Arabia, I grew up until I was 5, um, and sort of, so like I was in the U.S. and then I moved to like rural Vermont, which is about as far away like from Saudi Arabia as you could get. Um, and so I don't know that I guess it affected me as a person and therefore in some way as an artist, but I'm not sure like specifically how it did. I feel like, it gives you a different perspective, sort of a different way of looking at things, which I guess like sort of hopefully helps you as an artist. Um, but I don't know if I can pinpoint something specific.
Now, were you still buying comic books when you were in these other places? Like, is the comic book industry pretty much the same across these
Uh,
areas?
well, as an adult, the only one would be Turkmenistan, and there's zero comics whatsoever. So uh, there were no comic input for the 2 years that I was there. Um, yeah, just like really nothing. So I think it depends where you are in terms of what you can get. But yeah, that at that period, I wasn't reading anything. My dad would occasionally send me like a New Yorker magazine, so I'd see like the cartoons in there, um, which was sort of weird being in like former Soviet Republic, reading like restaurant reviews, like really well thought out restaurant reviews, as I'm eating like the same meal 5 days in a row. Um,
When did you go to learn your craft of art?
um, I mean, I sort of think of myself as kind of self-taught. I went to Hampshire College, um, which is sort of a weird hippie independent private school in Massachusetts. No grades, no tests, no majors. That
Nice.
that kind of school. You design your own curriculum. Um, and I sort of, did comics there kind of on my own, but I didn't really like I didn't learn any of the craft necessarily there. I feel like I got maybe big picture ideas about story or big picture ideas about media, but nothing about like what pens to use or anything like that. So I feel like it's been this very slow process of learning on my own, um, which I'm always sort of like jealous of like the people who went to art school because they just have these chops and they're just so good and they like somebody told them like, oh, you're using the wrong tool, as opposed to me like using the wrong tool for 2 years and then like watching a video and being like, oh, I should be using a nib. um but yeah, I basically sort of like got into comics and making comics in high school and sort of like just stuck with it and kind of like built on my skills and got uh figured it out, I guess, sort of got a little more refined. I don't know if I've gotten good, but I've gotten more refined at least.
I think you sold the hell out of that college. No grades, no fun. No, they're like, well, 1,000 people just signed up, right? And I was like, oh, I'm in. Give me that one.
uh it, yeah, I mean it was I have issues I think with higher education in general, just with like cost and what people get out of it now. But it was a fun experience. It's definitely not for everybody. I knew a lot of people who didn't make it through the 4 years, just because that amount of like freedom when you're 19 doesn't necessarily result in you studying anything. Uh,
So you're now attached to Miss Truesdale and the Fall of Hyperborea with Mike Mignola. How do you get
yeah.
involved with the project?
Mike Mignola sent me a Facebook message asking if I wanted to do anything in the Hellboy universe. And I said yes. Uh, just like he's like a creator I've so much respect for and whose work I've really looked at a lot. And so he just asked me to do it. He saw art I posted online, and liked it and thought I could do a series. Uh, so, uh, and yeah,
It,
that's kind of how it came about.
it's amazing to get, must be, to get a Facebook message from Mike Mignola. I don't think there's many of us who
Yeah,
can say that.
yeah, it was like, it was also like, like sort of like in this pandemic, and it's like this level of unreality to like every day, and then it's, like, oh yeah, Mike Mignola just messaged me. It's like, oh, and I can, I guess, message somebody else about this. Like, there's nobody to talk to. Uh, but yeah, it was kind of a crazy thing. A little hard to believe. But yeah, I mean, I've drawn all the issues, so I guess it's real. So,
Or you've just gone so far off the edge that you're now
yeah, I'm just
reading and
like,
answering to people who are not
yeah,
there.
sending weird press releases to CBR and stuff.
Mike Minola's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah,
I keep getting this message from this guy. I don't know who he is.
yeah.
So were you already familiar with the Hellboy verse at the time?
Yeah, I not like in the level of depth that like I think there are hardcore fans who clearly know a lot more than I do. But like I really like the Mike Mignola stuff, like him as an artist, and just sort of looking like at his growth through like the first volumes and like Hellboy and Hell. And then I feel like the stuff that's not drawn by him, I'm pretty hit and miss on. Like there's some here, some there, some BPRD. There's just there's so much of it now. And it's just like I don't know. This is just in general. I don't know how everybody, how the serious fans like read so much. Like I just can't keep up with that many titles.
Mm,
Like there are people who read 20 titles a week. And I'm like, how? I can't like I have a hard enough time like if reading a book month to month, like remembering just one book.
right.
So it's with the stuff that he's drawn, I think I've seen almost all of it, or have almost all of it. And then other things a little more spotty. Um,
So, I mean, as everyone can probably guess, the writer of Miss Truesdale and the Fall of Hyperborea is Mike Mignola. What has it been like collaborating with Mr. Mignola, and how does the collaboration function?
it's been pretty great. Like, like he and I like sort of chatted, just had sent some messages back and forth. He had this idea for the story and these characters. And then like he wrote a script for it. And he left it like sort of like he gave me like the beats of the story and stuff, but we sort of worked on like a Marvel method where basically he like broke down pages. Some pages he'd be specific about panels and things like that. Other pages he was just like, yeah, do what you think is best. And sort of, so he sent me the stuff. I would draw it. I'd send it to him. He'd sort of write a script based on the finished script, based on the pages I sent. And then we go. That'd be it, I guess.
Now, I mean, obviously, I can't imagine you agreed on everything. When there was something that you didn't necessarily agree with, how do you tell Mike Mignola that you disagree with something on Hellboy or Hellboy, the Hellboy universe? Do you, I mean, is he just go with what he says? Do you kind of stand your ground, be like, no, I really think it should look like this?
um, I don't. We actually didn't have a lot of conflict. Like, I felt like I had an idea of what the Hellboy, because I'm doing mostly the visual end, and Mike Mignola is, I think, pretty good on story. So like, and the story I felt like flowed and made sense, throughout. Um, and so I was just sort of like, I'm just gonna do my best with this, and like, yeah, there weren't necessarily things like maybe possibly with other writers I've had experiences where I'm like, I don't know where this is going.
Mm.
But like with this is like he had it finished when I saw it. So like I just read the whole thing, and it felt like it made sense and came together. So I didn't have to be tell Mike he was wrong at any point or anything like that. And he didn't really suggest too many changes to the art. I think there's like maybe like one or two panels where it's like this should be a little more prominent or something like that. And that doesn't bother me at all. My attitude is kind of like put it down on paper, and if someone has a problem with it, address it then. So
Now, the one true thing with everything in the Mike Mignola verse or the Hellboy verse is that it's very visually stunning and it looks like Mignola. I mean, everything, and it's
right.
unique compared to almost anything else that's out there. So when you're doing the art duties for something within this verse, what were the conversations like about style? Did Mignola want you to match his or follow your own style or a combination of both?
Um, no, I mean, I think he's like developed sort of this very distinct visual world on his own, and especially with him and Dave Stewart on colors. But then when I think about the different artists that have worked with him, they don't actually look that much like him. Like he doesn't seem to choose people who like there are people who could be accused of being like Mike Mignola clones. He doesn't seem to work with clones though. Like Richard Corbin looks nothing like him. Some of the Guy Davis doesn't. I don't like. I see maybe like a little bit, but it seems like it's pretty loose. So knowing that these other artists who aren't that similar have worked within it, um, and then sort of like wanting to sort of fit within the world, but like feeling like he kind of wants me to do my own thing as well. So I think any of that stuff was mostly in my head, like conversations about like what can I do, what can't I do, what works in this universe, what doesn't work in this universe, and also sort of like with any working with any writer, it's like what is the story and what way does the art serve the story best, um, and sort of going that way. But I also felt like reading the script, like there would be, like I said, there would be pages that were more broken down, but then there would be pages that were two or three sentences, just the description of what happens on the page, and sort of seeing something like that, it's like, well, I guess he trusts me to do it, so I'm just going to do it, and if I do it wrong, I'll do it again. like,
Now, now, were there any visual keystones that you felt you had to hit to make sure it fit into the universe?
I mean, so with the Hyperborea stuff, um, there's there's been a lot of not necessarily things set in it, but the world has been seen like a number of times, and so it felt like visually I had to sort of like get these sort of structures, these building types, um, that had been done before, and then there's like drawing Hellboy, like like I actually probably felt maybe like the most that was probably the most like sort of like pressure I felt to like get it right, because I feel like Hellboy has almost this like cartoon character quality, like Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse, where it's like he looks like this, and if you change it too much, it's like that doesn't look like Mickey Mouse. That I know you're trying to draw Mickey Mouse, but it doesn't look like Mickey Mouse. Or and so I felt like it's sort of this delicate thing to get Hellboy right, and I only had to draw him like in 5 panels. But like that was probably the only part where I felt the sort of difficulty of like fitting into the world, is that I feel the way Mike Mignola draws Hellboy is the best way that Hellboy is drawn, but I don't want to copy him. I want to draw it, but I really want it to look the way it's just like this like balancing act of like
Now,
um well, like Batman, I don't feel that way. Like Batman, anyone can draw Batman, they can draw him any way they want and it's fine. But Hellboy, I feel there's this a little more like strictness
mm,
to how he looks.
now, I didn't know that Hellboy appeared in the series. So, is it the first issue that appears? Like, what is the nature of his appearance in the series?
He appears later in the series, as sort of not necessarily like sort of tangential. I mean, there's a lot of like time travel, previous lives, things happening, beyond before time, things happening in the 18th century, 19th century, things that like so it's back and forth. And I don't think I can say much without maybe spoiling it. But yeah, he does make he's sort of in like two scenes. Very, very briefly. I didn't have to draw him a lot.
So, as you mentioned, I think it shows up in different time periods. How much research went into conceptualizing the different time periods?
Um, well, the main two are sort of Victorian France and England, uh, which I felt I needed to do a little bit more research, which is basically going online and trying to find. There's some photography, but mainly paintings. But then also sort of looking at the way it's been represented within Hellboy before, or the Hellboy universe before. Um, and there's also sort of, I think, one of like the brilliant things about Mike Mignola is that he doesn't show you too much. Like he shows you enough for you to know, but then he leaves sort of like a lot of the details, which are the hard part to research. Like if you're trying to like figure out what kind of like hats were popular in 1880 in London, it's like you could get that wrong, and some historian will know. But he never sort of like gets that specific. He like kind of gives you enough so it's there, so you understand it's in the story, and sort of thinking about that way of thinking of it, like what do I need to show in order for this like space to feel real,
Hmm.
um, without getting into too much trouble. Um, yeah, so the Victorian things I had to do a bit of research on, like clothing and uh, architecture, buildings. What did London look like? Um, what did France look like? And then Hyperborea was a little bit more like fantastic, and so it's like a little bit the the planning is more making stuff up
Hmm.
that fits within the universe already.
So, how did your conception of Miss Truesdale change as you read the script? And having read the whole script and knowing where she would end up, did that affect how you approached her throughout the series?
Hmm. I don't know. I feel like I had, yeah, sort of this basic idea, and then like sort of reading it, you sort of get this full picture of this kind of repressed, kind of constricted character. Um, and then like, yeah, as it goes along, it gets a little more nuanced. Um, but I don't know, it's very hard. I feel like that's one of the things as like the maker of something is that you don't really get the perspective of the reader. Like it's like I had the script, I knew where the end point
Mm.
was. I knew like the decisions that were made like for so long, and like before I drew the first page, I knew all that stuff. So it's hard to see it the way a reader does. Yeah, so I'm not sure how much it changed through the process, and the changes I think would have happened, you know, before I started drawing it.
Mm.
And so I don't know that might change in the process of drawing it changed that much.
Was there something about her that you made sure that inspired you visually in doing it, like a certain characteristic that you really kind of built upon?
Um, I really didn't. And it was easy because it wasn't written that it was in this, but like I didn't want to show her happy. And it's sort of like really like sort of avoiding like putting a strong emotion on her face. Like sort of like, no, like this is a closed person. And sort of that was kind of probably one of the key things, which might just actually be me making an excuse for being like lazy, and like, oh, you didn't put a lot of effort into the expressions on her, but it felt like she exists very much on the interior, and so the it's kind of a mask she's wearing um, through most of the story.
So, how many issues is Miss Truesdale and the Fall of Hyperborea running for?
It's 4 issues, starting in May and then monthly. So May, June, July, August.
Very cool. Mr. Lonergan, it's been an absolute honor to speak with you, sir, and it sounds like a fantastic series.
Oh, thank you. I hope people enjoy it.
I hope so too, because I want to buy the issues, so they better be good. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.